course, our own quote unquote. The building is not our property and it will never be. So we started a new phase that was really fulfilling for me, my colleagues, and our audience. We built our own theater with the help of our families and our audience. We opened up the theater for dance, for circus, for other companies. And then COVID came. We left our homes to the theater every day, which was an island of freedom for us. Every member of our company, of our theater, spent 10 years building Laputika. We felt a lot of responsibility. We devoted a huge part of our lives to culture. We wanted to make this island bigger and bigger in order to accommodate more and more people. We left work completely exhausted. It's very hard to describe this in words. We worked with hundreds of artists. We created many projects online and on stages. We were completely exhausted but completely fulfilled with our work. After COVID, we really enjoyed our work, although the premises where we worked were cold, they were leaking. But still, we were grateful that we had our space where we can create. All of us, every one of us. This may sound as a cliché, but a project doesn't need only the active artists. We also need technicians who help us create many projects. So we left work to go home, knowing that we are adaptable, knowing the importance of our team. We also left knowing that we want to plan, we want to grow, we want to stay open to new genres, to new generations, new cultures, new regions. So we started planning our future. But energy was leaving us, and we were faced with fatigue and frustration. Are there people interested in what we do? And not just in our company, in our theater. And then Stepan Kubiš left, a person who was very important for us, who drove the development of our company. And then the war started. But our experience with the pandemic helped us realize how strong culture was, how powerful it was. We started a project for Ukrainian refugees, for Ukrainians in their own countries. Students from Kiev left their home and they found a new home in our theater. These people need us, they still need us, but now they are leaving. It seems that the crisis is slowly getting better and better, and the Ukrainians are leaving our country because they haven't found what they were looking for. We gave them everything that we could, but it was not enough. So Stepan left our company, and I took his job. It took us a year and a half to prepare our vision, to define where we want to be in 2028. We defined it in great detail. Where do we want to be specifically and generally in 15 years? I left a theater thinking that I would put all my energy into our Laputika project. I gave it my heart, my space. I left full of energy once again. Again, I felt like a sponge that wanted to soak up new things, but also a sponge that has experience that it can share with others. So it's a sponge that soaks up things, but also releases things and helps others. I was leaving with a lot of questions that I find it hard to answer. So I left home thinking, what can I do better? How to use my experience and what help do I need? I surrounded myself with people that I trust, and I tried to define things for myself. We try to help our artists grow in their careers. We try to give our artists a lot of health support as well. We try to educate various groups, technicians, marketing, and so on. We try to open our space to resident artists, both Czech and international. We open up our space to foreign companies. We try to build the relationship with our audiences. We carried out several sociological studies of our audiences. We try to develop young talents. We try to import projects from abroad. We try to improve our financing. We try to open up our space for research and development. We try to invite directors from abroad. We try to enjoy what we do. Enjoy our life with the 120 people who work in our theater. We try to talk about sustainability. We really do try. And I think that 99% of what I just listed has been a success, maybe with the exception of sustainability.
The whole building is a really bad condition. And when we come with projects to make it better, it's like almost impossible in advance. And when you try to speak to people who work in culture about the conditions of people working in culture, what is the approach to culture, that's very similar to the building I have just spoken about. It's somehow anticipated that we will somehow deal. And I'm talking about the situation in the Czech Republic. If you compare it to Belgium, Finland, other countries, there are, in spite of the difficult situation, there are still new projects coming into existence. There are still talents. There is still interest. And I think there's a kind of alibi, because you will always manage. You know, what are you missing? You have a place where you can work. You have audience. So what do you want? But you know, our company or me, we are not just graduates from the drama school, but we've been working here for 15 years. Why do we have to prove something every year? Why don't we have to get some subsidy for a longer period of time? Why do we have to have a contract for the building for just 1 year? We are something between a project theatre and repertoire theatre. Why do we have to prove to someone that what we are doing is not interesting only for me, but for more than 100,000 people? So then I hear, well, then it means that you are mainstream. What is mainstream about a performance that I had to get with my father that took 6 hours? People ask me, why? What is this? Is it dance? Is it theatre? Is it circus? Is that really important? Does it matter? Why nobody tells us we don't want you here anymore, or we do want you here, or something specific? I don't want to leave again and again. I don't want to leave from the same meetings with different people, because even the officials don't exchange information. Like, for example, our 9-year-old projects about the reconstruction of the projects or our other projects. And in this time of insecurity and this balancing on the edge, am I doing it well? Or not really? If I do it, if it's bad, if my work is bad, then I don't get the audience. If I do it really well, then maybe after 15 years I have at least I can be sure that I have a place where I can work. After 15 years, Dušan Pařízek left after he built a really excellent ensemble in Divadlo Komedie. And what happened? He left. He went abroad. And I was also thinking about leaving. And the reason is my energy. I'm losing my energy. Well, Novak left Jatka, the space. Okay, so what? I don't have enough energy anymore to persuade people that it makes sense to support culture, not only by words, but that it really matters. And not just supported by posts on social networks or on Instagram. I'm talking about our genre, that means physical theatre, about new circus. I'm talking about new generation, people who are going to study abroad, because here they don't have space. I see new artists who have no place where they could rehearse. They have no place where they could discover new things. I also see directors who are really tired of the overproduction because they do theatre, many productions because they have to survive. So now the building, if the building of Jatka 78 is to be, there should be a reconstruction, and it will be the same in 15 years. If again every day we will have problems with the toilets that we have to deal with, there will be 16 degrees in the rehearsal room, there will be mold on the walls. So I'm not sure if also the creative spirit can survive here in this kind of environment. But I don't want to finish on a pessimist note. So on the 1st of September, I actually left the position of the executive director of Cerkla Putika and Jatka. Together with my brother, we are choosing from tens of people interested. And on the 1st of September, Ondřej Vykoukal came to this position. And I left hoping that we can create a new space for a new art, which was the idea how I actually Jatka called 10 years ago, where we can find each other, where we can kind of absorb inspiration, where we can inspire other people, where we can provoke, and where we can also entertain. If it's going to be in the building of Jatka, that does not depend on us. It's up on other people to decide. But I don't want to wait for another 15 years. I'm not going to. Jatka 78 is not a space. It's about people. It's about people who create this space. People inside and outside. But we can also create it somewhere else. It can be outside in a field, in a circus, wherever, where people will be interested in us. But where? That's again a topic for our next roundtable conference or other meeting. Thank you. Thank you very much. We try to do a kind of frequency analysis of your speech, then the word leaving. I think you mentioned it like 60 times or 70 times. Is it really something that you perceive as something constant, permanent in your life, in your personal life, and your career, that it's all the time about leaving? It almost sounds like, something permanent, your whole life, your whole existence. I just tried to look back in my professional career and also life and speak about all these leavings and departures and what they brought me. But the moment of leaving, actually now, I perceive it differently, and I can't compare it with anything I've done so far in my life for 43 years. But on purpose, I use the word so many times because I don't perceive leaving as something negative. I leaving as something positive. And because I could speak here, actually, I answered myself many questions that I had. Now here is kind of a banal question maybe, but where is really the biggest problem? Rostya. So where is it? Literally. Now I will talk only about Jatka, the space, not culture in general, because I think there are so many problems. But if you are somewhere for 9 years and it doesn't move anywhere, and our effort to show that you can, how this space can live and how it can be inspirational, when we now got a visitor from abroad for a workshop, he was in a space of a rehearsal space where there was rain coming into the building, and he said, "Well, this is amazing. It's great. You get rain." And I said, "Well, it's great for you if you are here for 3 days, but you are here for 9 years. It's not such fun." Last year, we had performances when inside the theatre it was 16 degrees. There were people sitting in really thick jackets. It was sold out. We had to apologize to people that we didn't have money enough for the heating. And that's really the biggest problem. For me, it's enough just to know if we should be there or not. There's nothing more I'm interested in. And if we have a subsidy for more years and someone supports the project, please give us at least a contract for more years for the space. We even offered ourselves to reconstruct the place with our own funds. And this is a repetitive problem, and I'm really losing the energy. Today, we have already heard twice the name of Dusan Parizek. You mentioned him as well, so maybe this is a question. Would you like to leave, or would you like to go abroad? Approximately 40% of our performances are abroad. This year we were in Denmark, in New York, in Budapest, Romania, in Poland. I don't want to leave, because I think the conditions for creation, for our work, are great here. We have so many talents in so many genres, in different positions. I love the creative process here. And I have found no other place where I could create so freely like here. But there are always some problems. And I think, as I have said at the very beginning, culture, I spoke about those, there are so many of them, but I would like this to change into life, into the practice, so that we can create here, so that we don't have to leave, so that the students don't study at foreign academies, only because here they have no possibilities to study that specific genre. Even though we speak about this with my colleague Marshikova, we've been speaking about this for about 12 years. And we offered to many organizations to have, for example, a secondary school or even university education in this field. And then you really feel tired. Could there be something more positive before you leave? Is there something to say? Well, today I'm wearing these black clothes because I spoke about the positive things. That's what I said. That's about perceiving or seeing the talent. Because I think really here in the Czech Republic we are always able to somehow manage. There are projects, emerging projects in unbelievable spaces, in horrible conditions. And I think that's really positive. And I would like that these people, and also for the upcoming generations, the conditions for their work get better. Thank you very much. So this was Rostya Novák. And we're getting to the final part of our first block of the first day. And now I would like to ask Dalibor Špok, who's a psychologist, psychotherapist, a coach, who deals especially with personal and professional development. And I think we can expect a perspective from the outside, and I'm very happy, Libor, that you have spent here the whole morning, because I think you might have get a lot of maybe useful information and certain ideas in which direction to go. And indeed, I want to say, please use the Slido application, because we would love to spend some time answering your questions. I almost forgot to speak Czech now. Because we would like to deal with your questions. And please don't be shy. You can have very personal questions, so we can make a kind of therapeutic window. So Dalibor, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. At the very beginning, I would like to say I'm not a psychiatrist. I cannot prescribe any drugs to you, so I can heal only with words. I got the information that as for the time, it's okay, because that's a bit ready for me, because there are many things I would like to speak about, so maybe I can talk a little bit longer. I also understand that I speak before lunch, because usually that's the best timing for speeches, because there are usually not so many questions. And then after lunch, of course, the people get a bit tired. But I'm happy that this works out well. I have divided my presentation into two areas. It seems that leaving is something very psychological, a phenomenon that we have to deal with inside. But not every time we realize how it is connected with the cultural and societal aspects, what it means in us, because we are somehow imprinted by culture and by society. So this is what I would like to talk a little bit in the second part of my presentation, and also about the changes. Why? Why do I want to talk about this? Because we are now in the time of huge changes, also about our perception of roles, professional roles, and our roles in life. And leaving makes changes to this. It makes this maybe more complicated, maybe easier, we'll see. I'll get to this in the second part, so we will speak about these aspects of culture and society. But first, I would like to speak about the psychology of leaving. Broadly speaking, leaving is not only the moment that I decide to leave, and I speak only about the technical aspects. When shall I do it? Who shall I say it to? Etc. What is the best way how to do it? But let's try to have a look at it in the broader context as a part of a change. Please, can I ask you to show the next slide? So, leaving is a part of psychological change. It's also a part of your identity. We don't always realize that, but actually it's clear. Even if we leave our profession, we have our certain relationships, we have our tasks, we have our ambitions, we have our visions. It's not important if they are successful or unsuccessful, but we are actually leaving all this. So it means that very substantially we are changing our identity. And this can be also partially a psychological death. It means that we are leaving something that actually is feeding us. It can make us angry, but at the same time it still is nurturing us. And it's always better than nothing. So let's go on. And we have to realize that in life we need to polars. So it means to be able of stability and ability of change. So to be in a certain role for some period of time, at work, in your personal life, in family, because without stability we can't create anything which is deep. At the same time, we must be able of change. So it must be change between these different roles, bigger or smaller. And whatever we are saying, if we say, well, changes are so important and we live in time of changes, culturally, deep inside, it's not really imprinted in us. And stability for us is much more important than change. Stability is an element of some security, something that goes on with us from the old times. To be stable, to be the same. In the past, it meant a big aspect of security. And these days, it's different. Very often, if you don't change, then it might be disaster for you. Look at, for example, how we define adult age. In youth, in childhood, you can experiment. Yes, you can go abroad. But then, if you are adult, what should you do? You should know what you want to do. You should know what you want to do, what kind of job. Maybe you can have 2 or 3 jobs during life, but especially you should have a stable adult life. This is a general requirement related to adulthood, but of course it doesn't make sense, because what is logical, there should be changes of stability and times of stability and times of change, and we should concentrate on something which is more important, stable. I get very often young people who want to come to me, people who are 28, 35, and they don't have stability in their life yet, and they don't know what they should do in the long term. And very often they don't have it because they are not able of change, because they desire stability too much and they try to fix things. So we're going to have a look at stability, because very often the ability to live in a good way is also connected to the good psychological change. Let's go to the next slide. I can see it here as well. I have chosen a number of myths or maybe mistakes that we make during the decisions related to changes in life. Again, decisions or decision-making is within some broader phase or broader context. So what you can see here on this slide, so this is not what I'm telling you, this is not my advice, but these are mistakes or selection of mistakes. So this is what I'm seeing in my life, but I can also sense it from some structures from my patients when they speak about their problems. So if we have these mistakes, if these are things we are sure about, then it's difficult to make changes. So it means also that leaving is then also difficult. Either it's too early or it's too late, too fast or too slow. The first thing, of course, we can get back to some of these things if you would like to talk about that later. So we don't speak much about changes. I should announce it later. So first I should know myself, and only later, as a manager or someone who who should be stable in their opinions, for example, a manager, then you should just announce it to people. But this is a really wrong concept, because this is not how changes happen in us. Change is a process. Again, that's a phrase. What does it mean? It means that it takes place in time. It's not one point inside me. It's not about pulling or pressing a button. It's not that I'm staying or suddenly I'm leaving. No. It's a process in time. And in this process in time, we not only need to think internally about it or to write it down. That's what we saw in the case of Rostya Novak. It's easier to be more aware of the changes and to go through that if you write things down. Because if you write things down, it's a kind of internal communication. So for change, the narrative level, as we call it, we scientists, the talking about the change is very important. Change a circle. It's about experience and talking about experience. So you want to get something, gain something from the experience. And how? How can you do that? When you talk to other people. So, for example, the first question is, around me, is there anyone who supports me, who is a fan of this change I'm thinking about? So, is there someone who is neutral? Is there someone who is not going to be a kind of therapist for me when I think, oh, it's difficult, it's hard for me? Because when I have experiences and I talk about what I experience, then actually by doing this, I can discover if the change is worth it, if I can do it, if I want that really, and what I really want by this talking about it and by the experiences. I'll talk about the experiences a bit later. So when you realize this, very often we don't make changes this way. So I make an experience by just the fact that I think about something. For example, I want to get divorced. I don't need to look for a lover first to have first such experience that I don't have maybe, but it's good. Not just sit down on the
Hej, raz, dva. Jo. Hej, raz, dva, tři. Raz, dva, tři, čtyři, pět, šest. Raz, dva, tři, čtyři, pět, šest. Raz, dva, tři. Teď to leze do obou, jo. Raz, dva. No, jasně. Ale leze to do obou, což je správně. Jakoby on to přes jednu leze do jedné. Raz, dva, tři. Zároveň by to tam mělo jít míň teďka tohle, protože to je jakoby originál, který by měl jít jenom pod mazem, pod ten překlad a ten překlad by tam měl jakoby jít víc. Takže třeba nějak takhle by to mohlo být. Halo, halo, raz, dva, tři. Uhni Ivo, prosím tě. Raz, dva, tři, čtyři, pět, šest. To vypadá, že to tam jde, že jo? Já tam vidím, že to tam leze a neleze to do jedničky. Takže to tam leze, jo, teďka. Neleze to do jedničky, leze to jenom do dvojky, vidím to. Jo, je to v pohodě, takhle. Jo, teď raz, dva, tři, hej, raz, dva, tři, čtyři, pět, šest, překládám, povídám pohádku, raz, dva, tři, čtyři, pět, šest, sedm, osm, devět, 10, překládám, raz, dva, tři, čtyři, pět, šest, překládám, raz, dva, tři, čtyři, pět, šest, překládám, raz, dva, tři, čtyři, pět, šest, překládám.
Počkej, a Karolina bude mít dvojnásobný čas, je to tak? Tak to budeme zavolat.
My nemáme jako připravený příspěvky. Já jsem právě, že pošlete prezentaci.
Dobré odpoledne, jenom že budeme začínat zhruba za nějaké 3 minutky, tak dokončete hovory a vrhneme se do další části odpoledne.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let's begin. May I ask you to settle down at your tables again, please? Before we start, I have one housekeeping point. The very popular open mic session we'll see quite an interesting group of people sharing their stories. But what I really want to say is that there's still a slot available. So if there is anybody here who wants to share their experience, you have a chance. So if you're brave enough, please go find address. And if there are more than one volunteer, others will have the right to choose the speakers, and the others will be asked to leave. But before I invite our next speakers to join me on the stage, I want to ask our star duo of Svetlana and Milan to give us a peek into their lives.
jsem nečekal.
So allow me to open the afternoon block of our program. Unfortunately, Mr. Baksa, the Minister of Culture, is not here. So let me cut all conspiracy theories at the bud. He is actually ill. He has a bronchitis. He is on antibiotics. He was really looking forward to this conference, but unfortunately, he cannot be here. I had one question ready for him, and if he's watching online, I wanted to ask why he is always smiling in all his online pictures and videos. So I will have to wait and ask him when I see him next. So our next speakers include Hanka Třeštíková, Vice Mayor of the Prague 7 City District Council and former member of the City Council responsible for culture, art and tourism. Our next speaker will be Adriana Světlíková, Director of Nová síť, Karolina Koubová, former Lady Mayor of the Statutory City of Jihlava, and Jan Kunz, the Director of the Contemporary Art Center IPO 1. And I also want to welcome you, more specifically through the Slido application, because this is a discussion panel. And I hope that we will get a lot of questions from you regarding the topic of leaving. So let's start with Hannah. Because I want to ask all the panelists to share some of their ideas and their experience with leaving. So thank you for the invitation. I have been thinking about this topic ever since I received the invitation, but I would have been thinking about this topic anyway, even without this event, because not long ago I stopped working as the member of the City Council for Culture, Art and Tourism. So leaving has been present in my life recently quite a lot. So I have a lot of smart things to tell you, but I'm quite sure you've heard a lot of it in the morning session. I wasn't here, so I don't know what you talked about. Being a former something, anything, is quite telling. And I think this is also a key to understanding what happens once you become a former something. It's a strange feeling, and I think the important thing about leaving is not actually leaving, but staying away. Not have the tendency to butt in all the time back into your old position. So I have to keep myself from visiting my old office, being too interested in what they do now. My name is Adriana. I am sort of a backup speaker. I was ready to enjoy the minister's presence, to actually make sure that important questions are asked. I am sitting here at the sofa with you. When I started working on this event with my colleague, I've been thinking about leaving, and I've started having doubts because I've been working in Nová Síť for a very long time. So I started questioning my presence there because I've been there for a long time. I started crying, started shaking. I'm really quite emotional right now, and I'm looking forward to what our panelists will tell us about this topic. So I didn't want to announce my departure, but I'm really starting to think about it quite seriously. Yeah, we may laugh about it, but I'm starting to realize that leaving might not be such a horrible thing. So I pass the mic to the former vice mayor, or vice lady mayor. Are you leaving or are you not leaving? We still don't know. When Adriana first asked me to appear on this panel, I burst out laughing. Because since November, I'm not in my old position, so I had a lot of plans what to do. And this summer, I actually realized that everything is different and that I actually left my old position. I used to think that life is in front of me, there is a lot of new things to start, and my brain didn't actually allow me to fully realize that things are ending also for me. So it was an occasion for me to take a breather and think about whether to come back to things that already ended. I am a cultural manager. I'm not a politician by trade. I'm a producer originally by profession, a former producer. So I'm returning to my DIOD organization, but at the same time, my political career hasn't ended completely either. I'm still a member of the council, although not a mayor. So I have a lot of thinking to do, a lot of things to clarify for myself. We already heard that there are things that we have to let go, but still you see what your former projects, in which way they're developing in the future. It's quite difficult, it's quite demanding to actually step away. And I'm very happy that you opened up this topic. So hello, my name is Jan Kunze. And the topic of leaving, I was absolutely excited when I heard that you chose such a controversial topic. And when the host here asked me to summarize the topic for myself, I realized that a very important thing is not to become jaded. I was a founder of a certain organization. I think I can say quite honestly that I was the one who built up the organization from scratch, and then I was asked to leave. And it was very difficult for me to stay positive, not to be overcome by negative feelings. On the other hand, sometimes when you are reluctant to leave, it's very good if you are made to leave. I realized that after 12 years in that organization, I became a bit too happy. I lacked a certain freshness. I organized exhibitions very efficiently. But when I look back, I have to say that it wasn't the core of my life at that time. And I agree that a good period to stay in one position is between 8 and 12 years. And even if you are asked to leave, it could lead to something very positive. I would like to ask our production team here to show us questions from Slido when they come. So let me start, and we will start with the two former politicians. The career of a politician actually includes a lot of leaving, because if you are elected, you have a limited mandate for 4 years, 5 years, and you know that at a very specific point in time, you will have to leave. When I went to politics, I didn't want to be the mayor. That wasn't my goal. I wanted to do a certain cultural politics, and I was quite surprised to be elected, and then I had to start thinking about what it is to be a politician. I've spent 3 election periods in politics, so it's actually quite an interesting experience, because when you are elected, you don't know if you will be a member of a committee or if you will be part of the opposition section. So when you decide to run for office, you don't know what lies ahead of you. And in this election cycle, I already knew that I don't want to be the mayor again. But still, I felt that it was important to continue on the city council in one way or another, because it's very important to keep continuity. I think our story is quite similar. I've been in the local politics for 3 mandates. I spent all my political career in the Prague 7 district. And I also spent some time in the City of Prague office. I didn't want to be member of that council, but eventually I was elected and appointed. And you have to face what life throws at you. And I really got into it so much that I was aware that the next election was coming, but it was quite a difficult 4-year period for me, but I think actually I did quite well. But you're right, there is a certain closed cycle or loops. I am now in opposition. Both of us actually are in opposition right now. So, Adriana, you already mentioned that the Nová síť network, how normal it is to ask people to leave in Nová síť. So in general, in work in regions is very difficult. There are a lot of circumstances and factors that you have to keep in mind. All these projects are very fragile, and even if you work on your own project with your own people, there are a lot of things that permanently force you to reevaluate your work. And we are often approached by people who face problems. They ask for help. One of our roles is to motivate people, and sometimes we actually tell people to go into politics, which then, if they do that, they don't have time for their cultural projects, and it could be quite frustrating. And suddenly they actually sometimes find themselves in positions that they criticized before, and they see things from the other perspective. So it's very difficult. But I think it's life. If you want to see change, you have to be the person who does the change. When you're in politics, when you're in a regions, you're a little bit on your own, and people don't really see you. You're not visible that much as in Prague. But speaking about Prague, when you have a new person in politics, there's always a lot of optimism. There's a feeling that things will change, things will move forward, but time runs by so quickly. So I have a very practical question. When you left your position, how did you delegate your work? In our video, you could see our colleague standing on the street, looking back into the window of his old office. So, how, on practical terms, how do you hand over your job to the next person? So you just hand in the keys, tell the next person, okay, this in the box you have the current projects and so on.
Well, I have to say it wasn't easy, also because it took us 6 months. Normally for you it was faster, but in our case it was 5 months before we managed to get a new council. And there was such a period of kind of rule, but actually not real active rule of governance, because we didn't know who we are going to hand over to, and then it suddenly happened within 3 weeks. And I think very often it's also important who is the person you are handing over to. And I didn't have this very positive approach or relationship with the person who was coming after me. So I had a talk with Mr. Pospíšil. I spoke to him about the projects in progress. I spoke about the challenges, about things that need to be completed. So I gave him a kind of basic overview. But then, even from his part, there was no interest in contacting me. And I also have to add that all the time there was a backup by Mr. Suženko, who was from the Department of Culture, and he was kind of bridge between us. So as for work, but also as for the personal level of relations. So the director of this department was a kind of anchor. And then actually practically, so was there one meeting during which you handed over? We spoke here, we heard speaking about Jatka building, problems with the rain. So indeed, so that they can't continue? How do these conversations, what do they look like? I didn't want to be like this colleague who is only standing outside waiting to be called back into the office. So I assessed the situation as such that I said I was ready for the position. I said it clearly that even though we don't have a good personal relationship, I'm willing and I'm happy to hand over anything I know and I can. So that's what happened during the first meeting. But further, there was no other interest. So I'm not going to come back and knock on the door and ask if I can help. But Jirka Solzhenko, the head of the Department of Culture, I'm sure he handed over anything he could. And Karolina, a similar question that others have just posed, because I think very similar questions we have here also on a Slido. Mr. Bakula is asking about the continuity of your work. Who is going to take over? How much have you managed to secure that your work is being continued? And what would you have done differently? So a very similar question. In our case, this was not a success. I have to say I wasn't in charge of culture as a mayor, but I was in charge of many other things. But even before that position, I was involved in culture matters, and it was a topic that I was interested in. In general, our political party of independence, Forum of Independence, we intervened very much into the project of education in cultural scene, and the former opposition was always against that. So now, because they are now in power, so some things are disappearing. And it's very hard to watch, because many projects are kind of suddenly disappearing. And it's hard to see, because our followers don't offer any alternative. If they would like to do it differently, okay. But they don't offer any alternative. And this is very difficult to reconcile with. You have to really take a deep breath and then think, okay, you are here also just for the period of 4 years, so we will see. But the work will teach you a lot of the ability to be humble, because very much about taking decisions. But what is frustrating for me, and I've heard here today many times, that voters don't decide based on the work done. It's very much about marketing, political marketing, which is very powerful. And that's usually the most important thing that you notice in the streets. And for me, the sad thing about leaving is realizing that it really doesn't matter what you have done. If you have a good marketing person, then it's up to him. Sorry, Hanka wanted to add something. I just wanted to explain a little bit from my point of view. It was handed over, my work, my position. But I would like to say that every 4 years, some politicians become ex-politicians. And then they are somewhere. And I could watch this for the period of 3 elections. And I also saw that there were politicians who couldn't say goodbye, really. And in such situations, it usually didn't end up well. And there's a kind of hopelessness, or kind of sadness related to these politicians. I think it's really important they should realize they're just not more in these positions. And they shouldn't just hang around and wait if someone is going to need them, or give some advice that nobody asks for. So that's even worse. Nobody is waiting for that. So I think you should give space to new people, to the newcomers, wait. If they want to meet up with you, that's okay. If you want to hand over things, but it's up to these new people. We had our space, now they have their space, exactly. But you do feel sorry about it a little bit, because it's not about ourselves, but it's about the people that we should work for. And then actually it is sad if you realize this, but you're right, yes, I agree with you. I just wanted to add something that the ladies have already said, or you can feel. And it's very important on which side of the barricade after the war you are, either if you are in the coalition or in the opposition. Because as Karolina has already said, it's not so much about the work itself. But I will tell you what matters. What matters is the political background, who supports you. I forgot how this is called precisely, but I think this is really crucial. Because they give you, if you have a person who is not competent, but the person has the right political support, then it can work, even if you don't have a clue. That's my experience. If I may get it back a little bit to the personal level, Honza, you spoke about this feeling of embitteredness, being embittered. That's what we a little bit sense in the morning, because the atmosphere here was, some light smiles after a deep depression. But you do have a kind of personal recipe or some steps, how psychologically to process this, so that this doesn't have a kind of long-term effect and doesn't have an impact on other roles in your career. My own experience is that leave as soon as possible and let go and start doing new things. Because for me personally, it was the most difficult period of my life ever. Because I was put under extreme pressure. It was media pressure, political pressure as well. And I just want to underline that Nová síť is really an excellent organization, because they can support their people. But what was interesting, when this started happening, there were 2 types of people. People who said, well, go on, you have to hold on, you have to fight, we will win. And then there was the other group of people who said, as soon as this is happening, just leave it, just go away. I was trying to fight, but the political background was so strong that it was impossible for me. And it consumed me up, actually. It was stifling for me, literally. And then I said, okay, I'm leaving, that's it, full stop. I'm gone, I'm off. And it's a pity, but that's it. The sad thing is, my dear friends, Of course, time helps. We know it also after a breakup with a lover. Yes, time is helping me all the time. But on the other hand, there are moments that I get this feeling of injustice, and I'm driving my car for hours, for example, on my own. Then suddenly I have to think about it, and I try to forget about it that quickly because I think I kept on doing things for such a long time, and I think I did it well, and I got a lot of appreciation. And then they got rid of me. Yes, really, got rid of you. Yeah, that's the word. It sounds horrible. Honza, maybe you could a little bit explain what you are talking about, because some people might not know you. Okay, we know now you are director of EPO 1 in a gallery of contemporary art in Trutnov. But originally you are from Opava. Maybe you could just tell us briefly where you were living, actually. Okay, just in brief. I was at the birth of the organization. It was reconstruction of buildings. Okay, the name of the project was OKOV, Opava Cultural Organization. So I was in the first team. I took part in the tender before the organization actually existed. I won this tender, and I was building this cultural center during 10 years. During 12 years, Later, I got twice an offer to become the director, and I thought, well, I'm an independent artist. I don't want to be the director. I just want to be the curator and the dramaturge. But then I refused. But then the political leadership changed. And maybe I should also say there were something like 5 directors. So all the time, all those years, I was only deputy director. They always kept me there because very often they had experience with other things. So I just wanted to say this to illustrate how many people actually worked in this organization. Then the city council, there was a new group of politicians, very strong. And the director of our institution got this political task to get rid of me, and she admitted that later. And of course, she got this position without any tender. And she started to get rid of other people as well. I wasn't the only one, but I was the most prominent one, the most visible one. And I kept on contacting the local politicians. And I was telling them, the new director is dismissing people and bringing her own people here. And I'm not going to make this if this goes on. And I'm sorry, I really don't want to talk about it, but Aldris wants me to say. They even are told I was bullying the other people in the organization. So after 12 years, I was charged with this. Of course, there was no conclusion to this. Nobody knows anything. And my friends in Opava always used to say, when they spoke to someone, they got this easy question. So how did he bully them? And nobody could ever answer this. Well, okay, this is how it went. So there was a huge pressure. And sorry, I just one last thing I would like to say, because nothing was proved, and I kept on fighting. So in the end, they had to send me away by changing the organizational structure of the organization. They said there was no place for me anymore. Sorry, I just wanted to add something. That's a comment from my side. You spoke about something like a breakup. And something I would like to say is when you leave. So one thing is to leave the position, but another thing, of course, to get in terms with this. You don't go to the office that you were used to. You don't meet the same people. But the other thing is also to be able to leave your colleagues. And to me, that reminded me the most of a breakup between 2 partners. Because the closest people I used to work with and who stayed in those positions, and they are still there. So actually, for me, it was as if they were my boyfriends who had another girlfriend. And I wish them the best, but at the same time, I feel sorry. to see him, this ex-boyfriend, talking to his new girlfriend, but I have to understand it. So these are really strange feelings I wouldn't expect that you can feel also in the politics. Could I just say something also quickly? What I think is quite funny, I think we saw each other for the first time some 3 years ago. And then I was at this conference and I spoke about setting up a new organization for culture, state-funded. And I asked Honza, I said, well, it's so difficult for you in Opava, please come to Jihlava. And now it's 3 years ago, and today in the afternoon, Jakub Deml will speak here also, who was called 2 weeks ago, because again, there are new politicians who, the reasons they have for this resignation are trivial, really. Because I think you all know, if you want to get rid of someone, you always find the reasons, and that's very sad. It brings me to another thing I would like to say when Honza was speaking. I think it's very important to internalize it before it happens. I'm very happy that the psychologist today spoke about the different stages. And when I was looking at it, I thought, yeah, probably I did have these stages, but it's interesting that you realized only later. Because if you are in the situation at that very moment, you don't realize this. I knew I didn't want to continue in that position. I knew it was bad for me. It was damaging me. It was a trauma for me. I don't want to speak about it much, but I think it's important to name things. And deep inside, I have decided I wanted to leave. And then when the result after the election was as it was, then I really felt actually bad, but so it was very ambivalent. So lots of these ambivalent feelings that you need a lot of time to process. Question for Hanka Třeštíková: how is it possible in politics to implement your long-term objections if you have the term only for 4 years? Yes, 4 years in politics, that's short. And if it's too short if you know what you want to do, and it's maybe long if you don't know what you want to do. But I think there are two main tools that can ensure a kind of continuity or fulfillment of long-term objectives. There are some strategic documents, so that's something I focused on. So, for example, we had a concept of culture policy of the city of Prague for 8 years. There was a concept of incoming tourism, and all these concepts are worked out in quite detailed plans. It's a kind of book, cookery book that you can use. Different departments can use it as a manual. And another thing is the personal politics. It means that in the positions you can nominate people, appoint people who you think are good at their field and who are experts. And you think they will work well and they will be able to know, to somehow predict or what the political atmosphere will be after the election, so that then try to get them there so that they can survive the election term. So I think these are the two main tools that you can use in the long term, related to long-term planning in politics. Karolina, is there something that you would like to add? No, I completely agree. I wouldn't say that better. A question to Adris. In this function, you have a lot of experience with other managers and female managers, of course, in the whole Czech Republic. The experience of this morning. A question from Adam. Where do you think there should come an impulse to leave from a manager's position in a culture institution? When is the right time? I want to speak about it here a bit, actually, because leaving is interesting. Many people, before they leave, or before they decide to leave, and they are in these managerial positions, very often first people who work with them, their colleagues, say it earlier. And I can see this very often during our discussions and counseling. Very often people come to us and they complain about their colleagues, about toxic atmosphere in the workplace, and they say, well, he's been here for a long time. Do you think he will leave? And my question is, well, do you talk to the person about it? And very often the team doesn't want to talk about it. So it sounds like very often everybody knows that the person in question should leave, but they don't say that. And when the person comes to us, the person in question, and we start to open the issue, very often the person is not even aware that the team doesn't want him anymore. So this may be something a little bit different, but maybe this is also something that should be said here, that if you are in a certain position, that as a manager, we check all the time, we evaluate, we assess what we do. But actually, I'm myself now getting a bit depressed by saying this. So the question is, do people really want me? Do the steps that I take, are they the good ones? So really check on this. And it's worth having team buildings and have some informal meetings. And we also, it's sometimes for us in varsity, it is a bit problematic. But very often there are these impulses coming first from people around you than from the people who should be leaving. And I think this is interesting, an interesting phenomenon. I'm not sure if I answered your question, when is the right moment? Well, the right moment is when this is coming. These impulses are coming. And to be fair, we should speak about these impulses. We should share them with our bosses, with the managers. I think in the political positions it's different. I just wanted to get back to what I said at the very beginning. When I was forced to leave, and I probably got a better position than I had before, I kept on thinking a lot, really a lot about it, and I came to the conclusion that I should have left much earlier, that actually I stayed for too long. And it happened to me. Many people spoke to me and they said, oh, what are you doing in this position? You should be in Prague. Why aren't you a director of this or that institution? And I felt comfortable there. And it was everything I created there. And I didn't feel like leaving. I was a bit lazy. But, looking back, I think I needed a kind of that someone kicked my bottom and, pushed me to leave and go somewhere else. I just would like to add that as for the publicly funded organizations, the term is 6 years for the directors. This was something that started some 10 years ago, and this kept on continuing. And I think the term of 6 years is a reasonable period of time in which the director can go through a test if he or she has an asset to the theatre, if he or she should stay. Another thing is the practice that during my term there were, for example, 5 tenders and calls, and very often the same people actually applied for the same positions. So that's a bit strange. So if you already have a certain position, you are, for example, director of a specific theatre, Divadlo na Zábradlí, Švandovo, so it's a position that you just... There shouldn't be a open call for such a position. So I'm not sure if there's not a similar tendency in the private sphere, if a director of some organization, if there's a kind of unwritten rule that the person stays as long as he or she thinks he or she should stay. I think that this period, this term of 6 years, should be actually made legal, because it should be actually compulsory for all publicly funded organizations in this country. I don't mind if they stay longer, if the people can defend their concept, if they can name things, if they present it, their concepts, to the council, and if the council can then evaluate their work based on their work. Because Now, it's still on the politicians who don't feel like getting into this. It's a very unpleasant change for them from both parts, actually. We also try to introduce it, but the directors of schools, for example, opposed this very much. And then there were more urgent things that we needed to solve, and we gave up this fight. So that's one thing. And another thing I wanted to add, we spoke about the right moment. We are talking now about politics. But I was thinking of my leaving from DIOT. At that time, I wasn't in politics, I was in the council. But it wasn't that crucial for me. But I myself started to feel that after 5 years in position, I was tired, I felt burnt out, without energy, and it would have helped me a lot if I had people around me who would have helped me to solve this. But DIO, the organization, doesn't have a certain special status. There are lots of volunteers, and I had no real support, someone I could discuss things that were problems for me. So once again, a big thank to Nová síť, because it was very tiring for me. I did many things intuitively. There are some things that you learned already at school, but I actually just graduated and I went to DIOT. So there was no real experience I could use. And if I had a team of some mentors, of some experienced colleagues or soulmates, I think that might have helped me a lot. Again, I decided myself, it was my decision to leave, but it took me a long time to recover from that because I was almost on the verge of exhaustion.
Yes, that's the loneliness of leadership. It was already mentioned earlier that one of our speakers uses a coach or mentor, how to provide a supervising environment for the top managers in order to provide them feedback. We are completely at the beginning with these things, I mean, coaching, giving feedback, and so on. I think this is something that the NGO environment should come to an agreement on, such as having a set mandate. And maybe it's a good rule to say that every 5 years you should have some sort of an evaluation session in order to clarify things for yourself. We now pay much more attention to well-being. Maybe this is related to COVID, when everybody said, okay, let's take care of ourselves in a healthy way, of course, but this should be a topic that we should talk about. Everybody's looking up at the Slido questions behind us. What is it about? So the new question, it's for everybody. What to do about a director who has absolutely no insight and doesn't respond to any feedback? Have you ever met with anybody like that? Yes, I definitely know people like that, and it was quite a painful experience. So I think this is what to do with a director of an organization. Once such a person has a political backing, then there's nothing you can do about a person like that. You can try, but you will fail. So when I was ending in my old position, there were petitions in my support. Nová síť gave me good opinions. Individual artists expressed support. Even the local Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts sent letters to the mayor, and it had no effect at all. So if such a person has political backing, there's nothing you can do. And now I will not speak only about cultural organizations, but we talk about the management of city organizations in various areas, the various fields. You often meet with directors who will not budge whatever you do. And they say, for example, they saw me as this artsy-fartsy girl from the theater environment who doesn't know anything. So it's very important to do the strategic work. You should clearly define what you want to see in HR, in operation, in development. You should define everything very clearly, and then you tie the director's remuneration to achieving these goals. Because these people can then talk behind closed doors with their friends, and they can run circles around you. So I can say that here in Prague, there are such types of directors without any insight. And we can find them both in the private sector and in the municipal sector as well. And I think you have to approach these people on an individual basis. We already mentioned the idea of having tenders every 6 years. And I think that's a good idea. Even a director without any insight, if such a person is forced to run for the position again, go into a tender, this forces them to think about their own work. And this actually forces them to get in touch with the reality. And as for the NGO sector, I think you should deal with such people through the board of trustees. I know this is a long process, and a difficult process. So then the next question is what to do when the city council wants to change something that you think is doing a good job. Nothing changed in terms of a cultural concept or cultural plan in our city. They just replaced the people. I have never experienced such a case, or I don't remember a case where there were efforts to undermine a successful publicly funded organization. But on the other hand, anything that's subject to political decisions, then you have to face the reality that there are elections every 4 years. So my advice would be for artists and art organizations to keep a close watch on what politicians do, and be ready to face bad developments. So have you ever had a situation where you had to fire someone? And how did you deal with such a sensitive situation? Did you ever have to say goodbye to someone? Yes, I had such a case, and it was very unpleasant. And we solved the situation by merging two sections. So one of the directors had to leave because we had one person who had strong points and he had weak points, and we wanted to keep him and get him to a position where he would actually make use of his strong points. So we sort of demoted that person to a lower position. But at the same time, we didn't want to lose her completely. It was very unpleasant because that person always eventually will realize that you want to sort of get rid of him or her. When you have unpleasant things to say, it's never a nice situation. I've been through cases like that, and in 90% of cases, we always found a mutual solution. But of course, that person wasn't in a very good mood when we talked about these cases. And eventually I learned how to do it because our director was quite a professional in firing people. There was a period where my office was in the storage room because that lady really didn't like me and wanted me to disappear. Unfortunately, I have had many cases like that where I was forced to be the person who makes the last decision. And there were 3 things that always helped me. First, it's important to speak completely openly with the person that is to leave. You shouldn't lie to that person. You should describe the situation very openly and honestly, because the people talk about the situation with their husbands, wives, their partners, and then they start speculating, and you cannot influence these speculations. So it's a good idea to be very open from the start. Secondly, it's very good to explain to these people that the change is actually good for them. Present it as a chance for them to move on, get a new job. And the third thing is to actually give them support and be interested in what happens to these people after that. Because sometimes we had directors of organizations who kind of felt that it's their organization and they are there to forever until retirement, and suddenly they were asked to leave. But eventually all these people were open to being convinced that the change is good for them. I wanted to say exactly the same thing as Hannah just said, because we've had several cases like that in Nová Síť as well. We always paid maximum attention to the fact that not only the person is leaving one position, but they are also moving to a new position somewhere else. Because, of course, you care about those people. And yes, such a person may hold a grudge against you, and it's always a good idea to part as friends. So we have always paid a lot of attention and care to the people who were leaving. Hannah, you already mentioned something very important. What are the criteria by which you judge the quality of management of these organizations? You said that it's important to follow clear rules and not just personal impressions. So in Prague, we have annual evaluations of all publicly funded organizations, and then sometimes we have bigger audits, and then we look at things like the number of tickets sold. But at the same time, you cannot say that if you sell more tickets, it means you are better than someone else. Prague tries to have the widest possible range of cultural activities. We try to work with all genres and art forms. So we have both very hard data that we look at, and we also look at the overall cultural concept of the city of Prague and whether the organization fits with this concept. Both Hanka and Karolina talked about the importance of highly competent people in the council. Some councils are happy if every month you put out posters with a cultural program, and they don't care if your program is good or bad. They just want to see that, yes, we have something for this month. All of you have left jobs recently, and I have a question. What are you doing now? What does a former mayor do? Because being a mayor is quite a peak in one's career. I have an additional question. How the word former is like final for you? Yeah, she's a former mayor. She's a former council member. Yesterday, somebody said to me, "Oh, good morning, former mayor," when I went on the bus in our city. I think it's a label that is very hard to get rid of. But luckily, not a lot of people recognize me, and although our town is not very big, not that many people recognize me in the street. And even if they meet me in the street, they don't see me as a politician, but maybe they see me as a mother if I'm with my children. So what the question was about whether the being former something is a permanent status. I think you should never say never. But I really don't want to go back to being a mayor because it wasn't a very good experience for me. I think we did a very good job, and I'm quite proud of what I have achieved there. But at the same time, on the inside, the feeling of being a mayor it was something that took me a very long time to identify with. I used the official car, like a more luxurious car than what I had at home. It was quite a change for me because we have a cheap old car. And then I had this huge, wonderful office in the town hall, and again, that was a huge change. And it took me a very long time to identify with my official position. And I think that helped me in the moment where I was about to leave, because the position wasn't something that was my dream. I didn't want to be a mayor. Actually, I found it quite cute. I'm really happy that even a person like myself, who is not really interested in politics, but even such a person can become a mayor, do a good job, and then leave and lead a productive life in, for example, art production. And I really enjoyed the fact that I learned quite a lot of things in politics that I can now use in the art world. And I'm talking about sustainability, better management skills, and so on. And now I think much more about connecting culture and public spaces, for example. So I would recommend everybody that you try going into local politics. And now I hear from a lot of people, they ask me, will you run for office again? Is it hard not being a mayor? But it's not a question for me.
Is there maybe a question of public administration? Maybe shouldn't there be something like kind of pillows as systemic tools? Some asylum for ex-mayors? Maybe you can have a period that it's difficult for you before you breathe in and breathe out. So the question is, what's going to happen? For us, it was shorter, not 5 months, something like a month and a half. But they kept me in a position that I didn't know if they would need me or want me in the position or not. And that was very unpleasant because that prevents you from cutting off. And it takes a long time to deconnect mentally. And the next step, something that is criticized in general, is For example, if you think of a person who had a very high position, so of course now he can do something which is not comparable with the same status. But if we connect to what we heard here this morning, if we are going to look more for projects, not for specific positions, then I think it's good to find the interesting things about specific positions and roles and to use it for our future career life. Hanka, what is your experience? The question was how to deal with leaving from a senior position within the whole system. I think a week after the election, I cleaned my office. I threw everything away, and then I was sitting for 5 months in an empty office. That was really weird. But if someone asks me, I say it's as if I used a pendolino, a fast train, and then I used a stop train. So again, but actually, so it's a big change. But now I'm actually happy to be what I'm doing, to do what I'm doing at the moment, because it's much different. And I think it's important what my colleague here said. What is really key is not to stick to your position. And before I became councillor in Prague, I worked in Prague 7, but I've been working for ages since my school living exam in the culture sector. And I think in Prague, I dare to say I'm somehow established as a kind of worker of culture, and I'm coming back to it again. And many people around me haven't even noticed that I spent a couple of years in the Prague City Council. So they know I'm still somewhere, and I keep on visiting many cultural events. And some people haven't even noticed that there was some election. But the more it's visible how closed the politics is. It's kind of bubble. And when we have our meetings every month, actually we are so excited about things that are going on. But then we see that actually in the media there's just one short mention. Nobody's really interested in some of the things that we deal with. So after 4 years in the council, you think, wow, okay, I'm doing an important job in having this position. But later you find out that not many people are really excited about this. So I just want to demonstrate that the fall you can cause yourself, and it depends how high you are on this ego trip. So if you start using very expensive cars, you have 5 assistants, and you are not able to write a single email, and you have lots of people who do everything instead of you. And then there's the election, and then this is the end of all these things. And you are again this Třeštíková, myself, that I was before. Then the fall is, of course, hard. But I think my colleague here and I think we kind of prepared for this, and we saw our work as a service. It's not only a function, it's a service for the city. So I'm serving my city for 4 years, or I've been doing that, and now I finished my service and someone else is coming to serve. If I may, I have a short remark. This is not only about the senior positions, it's about actually the cultural sector in general. Because you are there also, because the cultural sector is not such a big one. There are not so many positions. There are not many other positions, especially in the regions where you can go. So there is one theatre, there is one cultural institution. So if you want to leave, you very often have to go to a different town. So it's not about these senior positions, but this is also the reason why people stay. Because they have no other place where to go. In industry, it's different. You just go to a different company. Andris, a question for you. I want to dig now a little bit, and I will wink at you related to the video we have seen. What to do if you have no successor or a good successor and there's time to leave? So what to do with that? So again, the question is, how to deal with a situation in which you don't have a good successor, but it's time to leave? I think this is a very common situation, because we didn't know how to work with this. We didn't have a successor, or we didn't reflect on the situation in time, and that's something we are learning now. And it is difficult to state, but we can learn from this for the future, from the situation at the moment. because the environment should be healthy, it should be changing all the time. We should think about the cycles. And the word managers you are talking about, or the capacity of being a manager, I think it's something still new here, because we can't imagine that we might be in the position of senior manager. You don't necessarily have to leave your position immediately, but you can still be in the process involved. You can be senior manager, but there might be other people doing your work. They come to you, you can be kind of supervisor, people go to you and consult you. This is common abroad. This is not that we can't do, but we just didn't have the conditions for this. But maybe this is a new role we should get used to. And for my part, I would be really happy if in Nová Síť I could be in 10 years, but not in the same position as now. So I would like to be in a position of some senior manager who is still present, who is around, who helps the project as much as he or she can, but it's done by someone else. I already can feel now that for me it's I'm staying on. But if there's someone interested here, so please come to me and we can discuss it and we can get prepared for the situation in 10 years. The position is beautiful, I have to say. It's a very varied work. I'm just joking. But I think maybe this is a way how we should motivate our successors and prepare the environment. When we are on the top, maybe, in the best condition, then maybe we should probably leave. Because what else? We shouldn't wait before it gets worse or before I get problems. I'm not making hints to anyone who has been talking here earlier. But it is very difficult. It's really hard. We have been talking about this with Petr for a long time. It's really a very intense topic, and there are so many other topics related to it. We could elaborate on it, but maybe I will just pull back a little bit. I'm thinking how you are doing that, because you are writing a question with one hand and you are talking. There's a question behind you. It's sad that in the Czech Republic, very often we are not able to use the so-called senior managers. In the US, it is very common. Why doesn't this work in the Czech Republic? So is it only a lack of culture practice? Yes, I think so. And I hope Tomáš Sedláček will speak about this tomorrow, who will have an introductory speech from the socio-economic perspective, because this is something that we are missing. And I think as senior managers should be also in politics. I can imagine it's not possible just to leave the office, just hand over the keys and you manage here without me. Maybe there should be some period of some 5 months that you are still around. You can call it as you like, but this position of senior managers, I think it's a pity. I think it's really a shame that we don't use it yet. Well, I actually wanted to oppose a little bit. I'm sorry, Andres, but I'm not sure if in 10 years' time it is healthy if you are still around and there's someone else, a new person. I think this is something that we should work upon. So if the mother, or in your case, or the founder, or someone, whoever, who has been in the organization for many years, so if he or she hands over, so if it's a good idea to stay there, to be there parallelly. No, I don't think it's about a parallel position, but I think it's about some supervisory board, supervision, to be still involved in the projects, so that the people who take over the projects can have some consultations. And in business, it does work. So there's this shift from junior position to senior position, then I hand over and I move on in my work. So I think it's something that is already been used for some time, and I think it could work here as well. Well, I think that a senior manager is someone who has a lot of experience, but maybe from a different organization, because a manager who has lots of experience with managing a culture institution, someone who might bring a different insight from outside. Yes, of course, could be as well. But it's also about shifting in a certain position. So I do something, I'm good at it, then I move on. So I think by doing this, I can leave gradually and then I can disappear completely in the end. something we have heard in the morning. There are many different versions or possibilities how to live. So is it a good idea to just take the bag and run away, or is it good to educate your successor? I think it depends very much on the organization, also on the size of the city we are talking about. It's important if people can work somewhere else. But I think I quite like the idea of some professional boards, of some associations where people might get together outside of the place where they live. So, for example, Nová síť, okay, headquarters in Prague, but it works for the whole country. So if there were, for example, such a board of cultural managers for us, these senior managers, we might, give consultations in different areas, different parts of the country. So I think this would be really interesting because sharing, because 1 + 1 is 3. So I think it would be good for people to talk among themselves and to share their experience, even though we're talking about projects where they have not been involved in before. How does it work with sharing projects of public administration? That's also a topic we have been mentioning here many times, continuity. So how to safeguard continuity or secure. And I want to add, there was another question, it has disappeared in the meantime, and it was that with new elections, new politicians, there's always something disappearing. And the question was, are there any values or any priorities in the Czech Republic that might be shared across the terms every 4 years? Now, some study has been published, and it says that only the Czech Scouts have the same values. And in general, we can agree that these are very good values. I think this study, they showed something like 70% was the lowest figure. And I think this is that we are able to say that something is good for us, but otherwise I can't really imagine. I think continuity is given by networking, by the relationships that people have among themselves, that they don't get angry when they talk to each other. They might be even able to go and have a drink together. I'm aware that maybe this is not as for the process as it should be, but my experience is that people who have very different ideas should be able, when having a drink, to talk things through and be open. And also be able to accept some quality points from the point of view of the other person, and also maybe learn things. Maybe it's a bit naive, but the way the things are set up at the moment, usually the problem in the end is that people just refuse to go and sit down at one table. It doesn't matter if it's politics, if it's a cultural organization, but very often it's about the two people who have a different opinion and they are not able to exchange their opinions.
So I have a question for all of you. Is there something specific about leaving cultural projects, or is it the same as in other areas, walks of life? I think in the cultural world there is more screaming. Yeah, I think culture is quite a specific profession. I think things are different here. It is something that comes from deep within yourself. It is linked to talent as well. And even if you're a manager in the cultural sphere, you have a tolerance for other sort of forms of behavior and forms of communication. When people come to us for consultations, I very often try to find maybe psychologists, psychotherapists who are used to working with people from the cultural sphere, and it's quite difficult. And people often ask me myself to talk about this, but I am not a professional. so I cannot do the psychological work. But we are very specific job, just like pilots are very specific profession. It's a pity that the psychologist who spoke earlier has already left. So I really thought that he was someone that we could use, that it would be nice working with. And in this respect, there's very little care and support. We really should take more care about ourselves. This is a huge topic. But yes, I think that leaving in cultural projects is different than in other walks of life. I agree with the girls. We have a lot of professional hysterics, and let's face it, we like it that way. And we are slowly approaching the end of this debate. So if you have any question, please put it in to the Slido app. So the next question is how to deal with an oversaturation with professional identities. How do you balance work and private life in the cultural world? And could this be a motivation to leave? For many years, I have worked as an editor in a publishing house, as a director of a big gallery, as the frontman of a band, and many other roles. And I'm very often asked, how do you organize your time? So I have my agenda planned hour by hour, but I also know my limits. I know there are moments where I have to say, stop, I'm not taking on any more work. When I came to the Prague 7 City Council, I had my own film production company. I was working on several documentaries, and I worked in sort of half days. I spent half a day in the town hall and half a day in my production company. And this is an advice that I give to other local politicians, because if you spend an entire day in one role, then you lose touch with your other role. I'm really proud of my time management, and I think that that's true. Up to the point where you become the counselor for culture in the city of Prague. That's a huge organization. And it's a really, really huge job. But once you leave the City of Prague Council, you suddenly realize how much time you have and how you can time manage your job. So this is actually maybe a good suggestion for you. Don't be too hard on yourself. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. I don't know about you, but I'm not the counselor for culture in the next election period, and I think this has saved me from a total collapse. Well, as for myself, I have experienced such a collapse because I left maybe too late. I think time management is absolutely essential. And now I am learning how to manage projects in a sustainable way. Yes, working half day here, half day there. It works for me, but I'm actually happy that I don't have to work in the evenings as I did as a mayor, because I had to hand over prizes and attend social functions and so on. So I have to admit that COVID was actually a huge advantage for me. So right now I am looking for my new way of working, maybe on a project basis. So thank you for your suggestions, and ask me next year how it works for me. So for myself, what I can recommend is that we should learn to leave our work every day, shut the office door, and go home. I just got a dog, and that's a huge motivation to actually go home. I actually liked the example that the psychologist gave us about his friend who is a train driver, and he has long 2-hour breaks on the road, and when he does something else. But we should be very careful not to be consumed by your work all the time, because then you meet people and they are just really unhappy talking to you because the only thing you talk about is work. It's really healthy to have a release valve and to talk about other things than work. So let's be careful about what roles we take on. It shouldn't be only professional and gainful roles. We should also have private roles. So let's ask the last question. So this will be a closing point of our debate. So in your decision making, you always have certainties and uncertainties. How can we learn to accept uncertainty without wrecking our nerves about it? So how can you learn to accept uncertainty in your decision making and not to insist on certainty? You should be realistic about your own capabilities. Of course, I had a problem overcoming this myself. I often was scared to make decisions. And when I left, I made the decision to leave. I immediately started getting a job offers. So I was actually quite happy about that. You have to be confident that your CV is very long, you have good references, and you don't be scared. For me, it was a brutal change. I was a mother on a maternity leave, and the next day I became a mayor. So you should allow yourself to make mistakes. You should put together a circle of people that you trust, that you can be open with. And for me, what was the most important was allowing myself to experiment, to test things for myself. But this depends on everybody's personality. I enjoy testing new things and experiencing. But I know there are people who don't like it, and a lot of my colleagues told me, we cannot play, we cannot experiment, we are a city. But my reply to that was, well, if we don't try it, how do we know it works or doesn't work? So maybe you could go in smaller steps, try the smaller steps, and try to find the people who resonate with you and who support your decisions. Put together a core team that thinks the same way as you do. Because then it's easier to make a decision if you can rely on people and to have people who will stand behind you. And that's why I think Nová síť network is very important, because they're the people who will support you. You have already said everything, so what I can add is that leadership is expected from people in managerial positions. And you have to face the fact that other people might not be able to make decisions, and you have to be the one who decides. I think a lot of leaders are actually born that way. So I have no idea what I'm talking about right now. Yes, I think it's the destiny of people who lead. If you're in a leadership position, then you have to make decisions. And sometimes it doesn't matter if it's a good decision or a bad decision, but it's important to decide. And it's important that other people see that you decide. Sometimes it's important to make a decision even if it's a bad decision. Yes, I agree. Decisions are very difficult, and if a leader is undecisive, it's a very bad situation. If I understand it correctly, I think this morning was quite difficult. So if you allow me, I would like to end on a positive note. My mom has always told me that a crisis is always an opportunity. I know that's an original idea of hers, but she lives by this motto. I agree that a crisis is an opportunity for a new beginning and very often leads to something better. I am currently going through the process of departure, starting a new life, and I'm noticing that maybe in my generation, a lot is changing. A lot of people are leaving or are being asked to leave. And there is always a lot of drama around it, and it's difficult. But 99% of people who left or were actually made to leave are living a better life now. And their institutions and organizations are actually doing better as well. So yes, it could be very painful. It's a critical situation, an unpleasant situation, but there are high chances that the result will be positive. Okay, you haven't left yet, but I can assure you that we are doing better than before. So don't be afraid to leave. You couldn't have given us a better conclusion of the first day of our event. Thank you for being courageous to share your experience with us. And I want to invite you to our open mic session, which starts here at 5 o'clock. The open mic session will be even less formal than this discussion. So see you again in an hour and 30 minutes. If you're hungry, there is a refreshment available at the back and in another room. And for now, see you later.
Jenom teďka, že krátká poznámka, pokud vás to potěší, pan ministr sledoval celý průběh konference a píše mi, že ohledně culení na to při příští účasti velmi rád odpoví, proč se tak rád culí. Tak jenom, že tímto zdraví.